Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. This is me, your host, Preacher Moss, host of the SOS the Shout Out Show. I hope that you are having a wonderful Sunday, or wherever you are, you're having a wonderful day. I want to welcome everybody. And first order of business, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Tarif Attar, providers of some of the best oils and perfumes that you could ever get your hands on. And also, I just want to give a shout out to people who are coming to the show for the first time. We appreciate you. We hope that you give it a great experience and that you return. And for my brothers and sisters who've been riding along with me since day one, I want to say thank you for coming on the Shout Out Show. Sundays are always an interesting show, for lack of a better word. And I'll tell you why, because people are really into themselves, their feelings, getting themselves ready for the week. And I understand it. I totally understand. But this topic, um, I want to say the topic today, which is understanding the police caliphate of the United States. Now, let me begin by saying the word caliphate has always been applied to the Muslim community, that we were trying to build a caliphate of Muslim government in the United States. That'll never happen. It will never happen because we already have a police caliphate. Now, before I get into the whole idea of the police caliphate, pardon me because I'm going to have to back up and I'm going to have to pull from memory. My memory's not as good as it is, but I think it's appropriate to give you a scenario of what I'm about to talk about and share with you and build from that perspective, if you will. So I'm going to take you back some years, probably I want to say maybe 1999, if you will. I was going to Lincoln, Nebraska, driving from Long Beach, California to Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, this is important because back in the day, this is before Allah made me funny. You didn't have the apps. I mean, back then you had to have a map. Remember Rand McNally had to have a map? It was the road days of being a comedian, and the money wasn't that great, and I wasn't making that much money, but this is a big deal for me to go do this college conference and perform, because if it worked out well, I would book colleges, blah, 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 blah. Okay, your boy is driving from Long Beach, California, got a good head of steam. I come out of Vegas. I'm going up 15 north. I hit 70 headed towards Utah. I cracked the Utah line. I'm still going. Now, let me put this in perspective. I had an accident in my car, a pretty bad accident, and the airbag didn't really work. I couldn't push it back in. I had to get it fixed later. But I was driving headed east on 70, and coming west was a police officer. The police officer was in the right lane headed west. I was in the left lane headed east. Now, out here, I mean, back then, those speed limits were like 75, 80. Nobody out on the road. I'm driving, not thinking any of it. I look at my rearview mirror. I get lit up by the policeman. I look in the rearview mirror and I'm like, first of all, what am I doing? Is this the same cop that was going this way? You got a lot of questions going through your mind. So there I am on the side of the road. The exit for the town was Moab, Utah. That was the name of it, Moab, Utah. So what's happened, brothers and sisters, is this guy saw me and turned around, working on what the precept is called a bolo, which means be on the lookout. When you go through places like Utah, Colorado, if you're black, you're the bolo. Okay? So I get pulled over in a bolo. He gives me some rigmarole about I had a warrant or something like that. And I'm like, I know the ticket you're talking about. I paid it. But he goes, well, the computers are down. We're going to work this out. Okay. It never gets worked out. Essentially, your boy gets handcuffed, put in the back of the car. Have to ride to this little deadbeat town. I'm sitting there waiting, trying to figure out, this guy's talking about a warrant. Coincidentally, they couldn't call and check on the warrant. It's just on the computer. And I said, man, what is going on? It's like being in a Twilight Zone episode, for lack of a better word. Literally, I find myself in a situation. I'm like, well, here I am, black in Moab, Utah. I'm waiting for my one phone call, brothers and sisters. And I mean, it's a weird thing. I mean, I'm sitting next to a guy who, he told me, he was a serial killer. And I'm like, yeah, my name's Preach. Have a good day. But I'm waiting for the one phone call. And I gave my mother a call. And this was the weirdest thing. I called my mother and said, Mom, I don't even know what this is about. They said they got a warrant. She's like, what is it? I think it was like $300 or something like that. And I'm like, I don't even know how we're gonna do it. I'm thinking we got to go through, of course, a bonds person. The cop looks at me, and goes, "If your mom will send it to, she'll wire it. I'll go pick it up." And I'm like, "What?" Like I'm freaking out. Like this is not the way justice works. Long story short, I get released the same day. My car gets towed. I had to stay at a hotel that the door didn't close. Like I slept with my bed against the door because I had a bad dream that a wolf was going to come into the room. Okay, and it was a horrible experience. I didn't have my jacket. It was like in November. I had to run 2 miles to get my car. They had gone through everything, looking for drugs, whatever. It didn't happen. Long story short, I got my car. I go to Lincoln. I go to Lincoln, Nebraska. Let's fast forward a couple years. A guy named Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Someone's called. They said Michael Brown had stole some cigars or something like that, some smoke, cigarettes or whatever. He winds up dead. People say that he has hands up, don't shoot. Um, the federal report said that's not what happened. I'm not going to sit up and debate that. But the same group of federal people said something, and I was listening to a podcast, and this is very, very important. I was listening to a podcast that said that while the data or the circumstances of Michael Brown's death wasn't what everybody thought it was, that led to the riot, that he had hands up, don't shoot, they talked about the city of Ferguson's police department. Now pay very, very close attention. They talked about the police department. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, sis, how you doing? And what they said about the police department was that Ferguson's police department somehow contributed to what happened with Michael Brown. And what they said was the police department was established as a unit to grow and develop and acquire revenue for the city of Ferguson. So at least 20% of revenue was coming from the police department. And that revenue was coming from fines, arrests, impounds, things like that. Of course, that all leads to court costs, lawyers. So it's feeding an economy. So I call it the police caliphate, if you will. And I thought about this a little bit more because right now I think we may be missing out on something. There's this thing, if you listen to Malcolm Gladwell, he has this thing called catastrophe, which is really a really nuanced thing from Jesuit priests, but it always looks at summarily how we address problems. Like we know as people of faith, I'm Muslim. Everybody knows that. But as people of faith, we've run into some situations now whereby we will bring our principles to a situation and hold on to our principles and not look necessarily at the specifics, which means that we will say we don't believe X, Y, and Z, and nobody's saying don't stop. Those are your core values. But we sometimes fail to put those to the side and say, what exactly is the problem? And what's been bothering me a lot more as we're talking about defund the police, as we're talking about white supremacy and things of that nature, is potentially the fact that we're missing the boat. When I say missing the boat, we're arguing the wrong points. When we talk about police in America, you can talk about police brutality. Yes, that happens. You can talk about police inappropriateness. That happens. But we're not talking about the function of the police in a historical context, which is something that we have to do. You see, the police back in the day were the overseers. Everybody knows this. But what did they oversee? They oversaw assets. The police were there for the specific purpose of what? Protecting assets. And once law goes into place that those assets are no longer assets, they're human beings, human lives, human capital, and you can't possess it like that, then the idea of policing switches. It switches. And it moves from protecting assets to where we are now. Understanding the police caliphate in the United States is this. We now have a situation and scenario, brothers and sisters, where they cannot protect the assets. The assets are doing different things. It now becomes a weird sort of American exceptionalism extortion. We now are framed to extrapolate. We're now in a position to extract value. We are extracting value. If you think about everything that's come out of the Black community, everything from justice to music to culture, it has something in common. That those who did not contribute or develop that music, culture, I want to say movement, have found a way somehow to extrapolate value from the same thing. The civil rights value, we just lost John Lewis and C.T. Vivian, people who I thought were tremendous giants. But they had to know that their struggles, their sacrifices somehow have been compromised because people have figured out a way to what? Extract value. And now policing here in the United States has become an issue of extracting value. This is not far-fetched, brothers and sisters, because I've been beginning to think more and more and more about it. We have several aspects of critical mass about to crash into each other. The education scenario. We're talking about COVID. You know, COVID is a situation where we have a disease, well, not a disease, but I guess a plague, a pandemic, whereby it seems to me that it's so easy to do the right thing. I'm not talking about being a certified scientist, or epidemiologist, or infectious disease specialist. It seems so easy to do the right thing, but I'm like, why aren't we doing the right thing? Why are people dying? And I will hold this administration accountable. My memory may not be great, but I remember a certain individual saying that the death toll in the United States should be capped at 60,000 people. We're at 140,000 people, and that particular individual has not come back and reassessed the statement, spoken to the statement, or even apologized to the additional 80,000 lives that have been lost. Why? Why? Because they're extracting value. If you really begin to look at it, this becomes not just a thing of the police caliphate, but it permeates so many aspects of how we live, so many aspects of how we grow, express ourselves, do business. And I've been thinking about this, and it has really, really been bothering me. And I actually spent time on the track today thinking, you know, if this model has been in place for so many years, and it is disproportionately affecting African Americans and Latinos, and a person came to the United States and they weren't told, or they weren't hip, or they weren't really fully informed about that police caliphate, the duty of it now, moving from protecting assets to extracting assets. Think about this. They wouldn't know. They might follow behavior. They might produce different valuations based on the fact if that's what they're doing and it looks legal, I will do the same thing. You created an environment. And just talking about creating environments, brothers and sisters, it's a very scary thing. Because in that space, you have people who extract value, but they have to make sure that something happens with those people, that they continue to develop value. They continue to develop assets, of which you're going to take anyway, but you have to continue to do it. And for those who don't do it, I have bad news, brothers and sisters. If you're not a part of that system that's creating value, then you're not a part of the system, and you will be extracted. But that extraction is different. That extraction, unfortunately, is the criminal justice system. That extraction, unfortunately, is not being a part of the education experience. That situation scenario is just like I talked about yesterday about due to COVID, they're saying 41% of Black-owned businesses won't come back online when COVID is over. We're talking about a realignment of value. and how people are going to be perceived. I've been Muslim a long time, a very long time, not as much as everybody else. But I always wondered, my brothers and sisters from Pakistan and India and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, I said, did they really understand what was going on here? Because I know the people don't tell them. They'll give you a version of it, but they won't give you the full history of it. And sometimes that behavior has been mimicked. In our own Muslim community, we have a situation of people who protect assets and another situation of people who extract assets. One of the biggest things is the idea of usury in terms of culture, in terms of trust. And we have a ummah that should be way more advanced than we are right now. But we tend to fall into these same vicious cycles of the police caliphate. Now, I could be wrong. I could always be wrong. But let me tell you something here. That's just the police. That's the police caliphate. Think about this. There's groups of people who, number one, can't protect the assets, and number two, can't extract the assets. And I hate to say it, those are Trump supporters. A lot of Trump supporters. They can't produce value and they can't protect value. So all they have is elections. And even now, there's a weird plotting to somehow steal an election. And that's what you do. You steal an election. You frame it whereby the value of the vote is not what you think it is, but what I want you to think it is. I don't know. It's so, my mother has been around. Let me shout my mom out. Thank you, Mama Son. I love you. My mother was in the civil rights movement. She met King when King came to Danville, Virginia. Danville, Virginia is my mother's hometown. And I love the people there. But I will never live there. That's a dead town. That's a town that's built. That's a town, to me, that's a police caliphate. And when I say that, I don't mean it badly, but it's a town that has scars and wounds from being under that system for such a long time that it's inherent now. That you can look and see where people aren't going to work out, where they're going to wind up in this system. Because in America, if you don't come up with value right away, people think that you don't have value. And I'm saying this because we have a scenario whereby COVID, of all things, an infectious disease, made people realign what their value was. Are you protected? Are you being extracted? What are your assets? What are your assets? Because think about this. Let me throw this around a little bit. Think about your children. Think about your children. Think about your children if they're not given a full opportunity to be who they are, that they aren't able to express the art of possibility. That is decades of children. Like, we can't think about it. I went to college, and even though I went to college and it seems like, black folks are going to college, black kids are going to college, the reality is I'm a minority and a minority. Just call it what it is. I'm a minority and a minority. The statistics is maybe 11 to 12% of black kids go to college. I was one of them, and that was at the high point. What happens if I don't have that? What happens if I don't have a business? Or what happens if I don't have a successful business? Where am I in the scope of value in this particular situation? Because I took you guys to Moab, Utah in 1999. I wound up getting arrested. I don't know why I got arrested. The guy told me we're just going to talk. I got out of the car with no jacket on. I got arrested with no jacket. It was cold in November. I wound up in some funky jail, waiting for a phone call, sitting beside a serial killer. We was chained on the same bench. And I start going, why did this happen? I wasn't speeding. He told me I had a warrant. I'm like, dude, I don't even remember coming through. I remember paying the ticket. He tells me, well, we have to work it out in the morning. Why do I have to stay in jail and work it out in the morning? My mother says, I'll send you the money. She wired it. A law enforcement officer went and picked it up. She didn't even wire it to the jail. They went and picked it up like it was a Western Union or something like that. It was Western Union, but a MoneyGram. But I'm like, how are you dubbing yourself to be? And it hit me. It hit me. The word. What was the word I said? Bolo. That's what they call. That's what they call it, a bolo. Be on the lookout. And now we have a situation in the police caliphate where even some of our own social justice movements are acting like the police caliphate. Now, I don't hate on Black Lives Matter. I understand the functionality. But when I read the charter, the rules, the fine print, I became worried. And why is that important? Because we just lost two social justice giants. Again, John Lewis, again, C.T. Vivian. On Friday, we lost two social justice giants. You know who never put a statement out that I saw? Maybe I'm wrong. Black Lives Matter. I have not seen a... Let me give you a call. Brother Kevin, thank you for coming on, man. Appreciate you. Assalamu alaikum. I haven't seen a big statement from Black Lives Matter. Why not? Because Black Lives Matter, whether we want to admit it or not, is almost like the same police caliphate we're talking about. They're figuring out how to extract value from the Black struggle. Not necessarily contribute to it, but extract value. And when I say extract value, they're extracting value for their own purposes. They tell you they don't like the Black movements, Black nationalist movements. They call the movements they not being inclusive. Look, man, you talking the 40s, 50s, and 60s. You didn't even have the protection of the law. And now this is where it's come to. And we have to be careful. You see, Black Lives Matter is almost like that little trip I took in Utah, see, because in some regards, yes, we understand the function of it. We have principles. Yes, Black Lives Matter, but that does not mean that you don't look at the specifics. And being able to look at the specifics is the only way we're going to move forward. Because I've been around social justice my whole life. And I'm going to tell you something. People say, this is different. This is different. I'm like, yeah, potentially it's being done wrong. That we're signing up for something that has to do with extraction. It has nothing to do with us. Think back in the day. Sharecropping. Newly freed slaves worked the lands of their masters and worked them. And the law said you could be free, whatever that means. But when they wanted to be independent business people, I'm going to give a shout out to Brother Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, man. Appreciate you. Big Z, all the way from Toledo. Thank you. It's always been a hustle for Black economics, minority economics, and movement amongst minorities. I believe that's always been an issue. The whole idea is being on the block is a misnomer. The whole idea of being on the block is this metaphor. It's not cool on the block. It's not great on the block. The glorification of the hood ain't that great. People leave the hood because they recognize it. It's this idea of people settling in the hood. When they settle in the hood, it's for reasons. And they're not healthy reasons. That asset that stays in the hood, for lack of a better word, if you think about Ferguson, Missouri. Those Black people were tortured. They were in a police state. The police held these people hostage on their movements. I've seen the whole idea, not just, poor Michael Brown, may Allah be pleased with him, but I'm talking about people trying to live their everyday lives, driving cars, the amount of tickets that were written, the amount of citations that were given, where you parked, where you drove your car, you drove too fast, a light was out, you missed a stop sign, you didn't stay at the stop sign long enough, I think you were on your cell phone. The amount of jaywalking tickets that were written, people were off the chart. And what I realized is that kept those people in check because you needed them in check because that's where you were extracting your value from. That's where you were getting your money from. That's where you were getting your power from. And you create that whole situation. And then you take the police officer. And this is a deep concept. Because that police officer services the principle of that police caliphate. But that police officer, when they extract that value, they get no benefits from it. When they protect that value, they get no benefits from it. And therein is the scope of the police officer, the peace officer, who literally finds themselves just a hair above the people that he's oppressing. And brothers and sisters, this is not meant to be a bad thing, but I mean, sometimes you just got to talk the truth. I know what I've said here today is no surprise to folks, but we got to get back into the space of just being plain spoken. You know, because you have the nuances of just outright madness. People shooting folks. I remember, I used to do a joke about the police. Well, I did a lot of jokes about the police, I won't lie. About the citizen who shot a black man in the back. The black man was still living. And the citizen demanded that the police charge the black man with robbery. He said, what did he steal? He said he stole my bullets. He was trying to get away. Therein tells you the mentality that you're dealing with. Therein is the truth. So when you look at leadership, don't frame it as this crazy man. He's not crazy. He's part of a system. He's a businessman. His whole thing has been protect assets and extract value. He just happens to be the president of the United States. And he reminds all the people who are afraid of him, you're doing the same thing. So you can tell your pie in the sky on the Democratic side, you tell your pie in the sky on the Republican side. When it comes to people, you have to look around and go, who are the people who are suffering? Who has to give up the most? I believe that there might damn near be a civil war just on the idea that you're going to have a large group of teachers that make a decision about going back to school and teaching children or staying home and protecting the welfare of their own kids. You see the madness. Now, the only thing here is who wins? Who extracts value? Would this be a plea? Well, I mean, you're going to call in the National Guard and make teachers come in to work because that's how crazy it is. That's how close we are to this madness. And brothers and sisters, I really just want you to take a moment to just think about it. This is one of those quiet Sundays, man. I'm not doing anything. There's no NFL I got to worry about. But I'm saying this because these are things that are on my mind. If I was performing, you would see them on stage played out through the language of humor. But I decided today just to give you the concepts, and then you can apply your own humor. And the thing about the humor, they said, Clarence Darrow said, he said, when you stop laughing, when you lose the power to laugh, you lose the power to think. I have not stopped laughing yet, and I hope you haven't stopped laughing yet either. In the words of George Clinton, think it ain't illegal yet. Brothers, I'll see you on the next shout out show. Or brothers and sisters, sorry, I'll see you in the next shout out show. And I have to give Sister Ika all the way from Indonesia. She's a regular participant on a shout out show. I want people to just think about those things. So the next time you see a young person or somebody being pulled over for an offense, think about that system. Did they really commit a crime, or are they just a part of a system that says we have to extract value? That's it for me. I'm going to get myself an Impossible Burger. Have a blessed day, a really blessed day, and I'll see you on the next shout out show. I'm Preacher Moss.